up Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Geopolitics with Ghost. I'm your host, Gordon McCormick. Today is September 19th. Apologize. I was having an issue with my camera and it seemed like it was like mirroring me or something. But how's the chat doing today? Yeah, I thought that song was appropriate. In the song, it's about not settling down. I've settled down. I have a wife and kids and live in the suburbs. But when it comes to debate and discourse and accepting things, accepting what we're told, none of us should settle down. We should all be very much up in arms, demanding the truth at all times and pushing for it. And I think that's what this network's all about, and that's what we push for on every show that I'm on, and every show that's on this network, for that matter. So, anyway, yeah, welcome to the show. We are going to get started here. We're going to get a word from a sponsor first, and our first sponsor today is going to be Goldco. So let me pull that up. Bear with me for a second. These video libraries get me sometimes. There we go. Found it. All right, 1 second. Is your wealth ready for Trump's next wave? Gold loves a Trump headline, and it's soaring. From the day he first took office, gold prices have climbed, gaining nearly $400 per ounce since his second term began. Why? Gold thrives in uncertainty. It's a time-tested safe haven, immune to government meddling, a shield against inflation, and a proven way to protect your wealth when markets wobble. With Trump's second term heating up, will gold smash new records in 2025? Nobody knows how high it could go, but smart investors aren't waiting to find out. Take control today. You could even qualify for up to a 10% bonus and free silver. Discover an IRS-approved way to diversify your savings with gold and silver, tax and penalty free. Get your free gold and silver kit delivered straight to your door and learn how to safeguard your future. Visit badlandsgold.com to claim your kit and start building a stronger portfolio today. That's badlandsgold.com. Don't miss out. Okay. And a few people pointed out to me on Tuesday that we didn't have any technical issues, or at least I didn't mute myself. So like I freaked out a little bit during the ad read because I don't know why it's running a second time. Because I was like, I didn't check if I was muted or not. And then I've also been having this weird thing where my mic will be plugged in, not muted, but for some reason it's not picking up. I don't know if it's the USB port going out or something, but anyway, I think we're good. I see that we're picking up sound on the little balance reader or whatever in the program. And nobody has yelled at me yet in the chat, so we're good. Okay, so today we are going to. I've had a lot of people send me feedback on Tuesday's show. I appreciate all that. Seems like it was the spirit of it was well received. We spent an inordinate amount of time. I didn't intend to spend like 90 minutes on the Charlie Kirk thing, but I'm glad I did, because I feel like I got all my thoughts out on it and presented some of the things I wanted to present. And so I hate to do this, but I think it's appropriate. There's 2 videos that I want to show. They're a little long. They're like 7 or 8 minutes apiece. Because I think they're worthwhile watching. The first, and again, this is doing the Charlie thing. And then once we get through these videos, we will just go to the typical geopolitical show. But I think that this is important information to share. And I'm sure some of you probably seen it, but maybe not all. So, we're just going to go ahead and do it. The first would be Tucker Carlson. There were a lot of people sending me messages saying that I got some text messages, I got some DMs, I got some comments on the video that Tucker had put something out on Tuesday night that resonated or aligned with what I was talking about on Tuesday. And I did finally get a chance to watch. I didn't really get a chance to watch it until like yesterday, but I did finally get to go watch Tucker's little 30-minute video he put out of just himself speaking. And it was powerful. For sure, it was powerful. It was good. It was well done. I know opinions on Tucker vary. I think I shared mine on Tuesday. But there was a segment of it. There was a clip of it portion of it towards the end that I wanted to share. Because, again, I think it resonates a little bit with what we talked about on Tuesday. And so, again, I've noticed this for a while now, and you may have noticed that I'm not as active on like X as I used to be. X has just kind of become like a cesspool of like just, thought. And there's just a lot of like infighting and a lot of triggered emotions, and this goes back way before Charlie was shot. And I've just noticed that there's a lot of psyops being run. There's a lot of people responding to psyops. There's a lot of operatives out there who I think are, maybe they're just acting on their own volition. Maybe they're acting because something else is animating them. But I've just noticed that it's become a very toxic environment. I hate using that word, but like a toxic environment. And so it's not that I don't see it as a useful resource. It's that I noticed that right now everything is being weaponized. Like every idea out there is being weaponized. Everything is being distorted and warped. And so I try to, I've just been focusing more on like the spoken word and like the podcast side of things, as well as doing stuff on Substack, like writing for the Badlands news brief. And I'll post stuff to Telegram more often than I do to X these days. But it doesn't mean I'm not using X anymore. I don't want anyone to misunderstand me when I say that. I lost my spot, so we'll have to find it real quick. But that's it for people. People have asked me that, why am I not posting as much on X? And it's just because X is just like, Chris Paul's right when he talks about X. It's just like it's kind of a cesspool. And it's you can use it as a platform to put ideas out there, and you can use it as a platform to check in on others' ideas when you're get your finger on the pulse of where the zeitgeist is. But as far as like earnest and honest discourse, it's just such like things are censored, and their algorithm is so messed up, and it's not really a big fan these days. So anyway, yeah, let's listen to Tucker. I might skip through a little bit because I want to hear him talk about his personal experience, according to him, speaking with Charlie Kirk, specifically at the Turning Point USA rally back in Tampa in July I think it was July 11th through 13th.
They do. And this is something, by the way, that Charlie thought about a lot and that I had. And so any attempt to impose hate speech laws in this country, and trust me, there are a lot of people who would like them. There are a lot of people who'd like to codify their own beliefs by punishing those under the U.S. code who disagree with their beliefs. Any attempt to do that is a denial of the humanity of American citizens and cannot be allowed under any circumstances. That's got to be the red line. Because again, when they can do that, what can't they do? And this is something, by the way, that Charlie thought about a lot and that I had occasion to talk to him about a lot. And I really don't want to make any of this about me because it has nothing to do with me. But I did have reason to have these conversations with Charlie a lot, many, many times over the past 3 or 4 months. And this began at an event that he held in Florida in July, the TPUSA MFest event, Turning Point. I often go. I always have the best time. I always see Charlie ahead of time. We have a cup of coffee in a hotel room, talk about what's going on. In addition to being, of course, a conservative advocate, he was also a conservative organizer, a coalition builder, and he was very involved in politics in a way that I'm not. So it was interesting as hell. But it was also a way to learn what young people are thinking about, talking about, because he was on college campuses all the time. And what is the state of a couple of big debates that are happening within the Republican coalition, particularly around foreign policy. And Charlie's views on foreign policy, which I think are fairly well known now, a lot of people lying about them, were evolving, but had really evolved. And who knows why he reached the conclusions he did. I think his Christian faith informed them mostly. It was also the experience of talking to young people, and his views were very much like theirs. He believed that the war on terror had been a net loss for the United States, and it caused incalculable damage, not just economic and physical damage, but spiritual damage to the United States. It was bad. We got nothing out of it. We were only hurt. And he didn't want to see that again. And he felt very strongly about that. And of course, I agreed. And so before that speech that I gave in July, we had a conversation about this backstage right before I went on. And I was fulminating and getting all red in the face like I often do, to my shame. And I was mad thinking about this and thinking about the effort by the neocons in the United States to draw a...
All right, I'm going to slow it down here just because I know I was speeding it up just to get us through it. But I want to slow it down just so everyone can hear what he says here, because here's the part that I think is really important. All right.
In to another forever war with Iran. It's not a defense of Iran, of course. It's merely an acknowledgement that we've done this before. This happened in Iraq, which we entered into at the behest of those same foreign policy strategists, and it didn't work. And so,
and when he says those same foreign policy strategists, he's talking about the neocons. But as I mentioned before, I had on Monday Adam Riva on the Book of Trump and his new documentary about a clean break. He goes in depth, explains exactly how those foreign policy strategists came together, who they were working for. They were working for Netanyahu originally. He was the one who commissioned them to put the clean break doctrine report together in 1996. And then, of course, they end up in the Bush administration as like effectively lawyers crafting our foreign policy agenda in Iraq and the Middle East.
I was going on at some length backstage with Charlie, and I said, probably not going to talk about that. I'm not going to torture you. I know your donors hate this when I say that. And also Epstein was in the news, and it was clear to me that, Epstein's probably not like a Mossad agent or something, but Epstein clearly had contact with Israeli intelligence and American intelligence and French intelligence, but the only one you're not allowed to talk about is Israeli intelligence. But it seemed true to me, and I had done some work on that. I knew a bunch of people pretty close to that story. So I thought that. And I said that to Charlie. And I said, but I'm not going to say that because I don't want to make your donors mad. I know it's just going to be like an endless flurry of text telling you to stop or you're going to lose a bunch of funding. And he looked at me, I'll never forget it, and said, go all the way. Do it. Go all the way. I said, man, a lot of things I can talk about. I don't need to talk about that. And he said, do it. So I did it. By the way, I think that conversation, he had a mic on, and so did I, probably exists somewhere on somebody's server, but that's, I think, a faithful rendition of what he said. And by the way, I'm not trying to blame him for my remarks. You can agree or disagree with those remarks, but I'm saying this only because I was shocked and sickened by the...
Okay, so before he goes any further, we're going to listen to a little more, but that was really the crux of what I wanted to share, because it's like I've obviously you've probably noticed a lot of inflection and a lot of reflection and a lot of soul searching is probably the wrong term. That's probably a little dramatic, but when it comes to Charlie Kirk, I've had very strong opinions on Charlie Kirk, and I've shared those opinions, and I don't take back any of my criticisms when it comes to like political positions, because I think the criticisms I had were fair. The criticisms I still think are right. I still think I made them in earnest, and I made them based on my understanding of what Charlie Kirk's public positions are. And as Tucker kind of explains, and others have explained, he was trying to navigate getting out of that like trapped position that he felt like he was in. Obviously facing a lot of pressure not to. And the pressure that he was facing, I think, I would like for that to be explored a little deeper, because I think that'll really give us insight into the people who control the U.S. foreign policy apparatus. But I could see that, a year ago, 2 years ago, I may have looked at that in a much more cynical way, like, oh, well, he's getting talking orders from somebody. There's a 4 a.m. Dropbox that's giving him the talking points or the orders, just like the CNN's getting, right? But I actually don't think that's what it is. I think, like I was saying on Tuesday, I really think it's more like people he respects, adults he respects, older, wiser people in his eyes that he respects, telling him, maybe even authoritative figures telling him, hey, Charlie, if you do that, if you criticize that policy position, if you criticize Netanyahu, if you criticize whatever, that's going to be used, like, because of your stature, because of who you are. Hamas is going to use that. Nick Fuentes is going to use that. The opposition, the pro-Palestinian, the pro-Hamas opposition is going to use that as not only as a recruiting tool, but to hurt Israel. If people are going to die because of you. I could see that 100%. Somebody telling him that, and from his perspective, he's like, okay, well, if that's true, like if I'm going to put people's lives in danger because of my stature, like fine, like I could see it being that kind of manipulation. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a talking point that's handed to him. It could be the combination of his earnest love for the land of Israel, combined with influence being, certain things being said to him in a certain way by people who he respects. Right. So anyway, but it sounds like in that moment, because when Tucker and Steve Bannon come out and they give those speeches, that was a total inflection point. I talked about it on Tuesday. That was a turning point. And Chris Paul talked about it on Badlands Daily this morning. That was a turning point, because what ends up happening is, Laura Loomer comes out and a bunch of people come out and attack. But that was the second turning point. I think the first was a month before, on June 13th, when Israel attacks Iran. The following Monday, I totally forgot about Eric Trump, but Chris Paul reminded me this morning on Badlands Daily, and he's told me this before, but I just didn't register it when I was talking about it on Tuesday. But Bannon has two guests on like after Iran gets bombed, and this is after Trump. I think it was after Trump came in and bombed Iran and like ended the 12-day war or whatever, right? It was either, I got to go back and check when Trump dropped his bomb, but it was when it looked like we were going to go to war with Iran. I think it was Monday, June 15th, I think it was, or maybe it was 16th. But Bannon had Eric Trump on first, and Eric Trump came out and said, my father is the greatest rhino hunter in history, talking about Trump's ability to expose fake Republicans, neocon uniparty Republicans, and destroy their careers. And then, of course, after Eric Trump, he had Tucker on for like an hour, and him and Tucker just like talked about, and it was it felt like a very honest conversation. It felt like you were getting a very honest conversation between two guys who were actually genuinely concerned about something that looked like it was unfolding, that they had seen unfold before. Because Tucker, for those who don't know, in the late 90s, worked for Bill Kristol. And there are clips that were circulating relatively recently of him on, I don't know if it was Fox News at the time or CNN or MSNBC, but all of those things were much more centrist. Like MSNBC and CNN weren't considered like hyper left wing at that time. Everything was kind of much more down the middle. Fox News, I think, only launched in 1997, and obviously it was posited towards conservatives. But even the left wing outlets, which were left wing, they weren't like they are now. I mean, they at least presented themselves as being less biased, even though clearly they all were biased all along. And so Tucker was on those. I've seen the clips where Tucker's on there talking about how he was working for Bill Kristol and being very like arrogant and kind of flippant about his positions. And so it's like, I think he was working in the neocon world. I think he was a neocon. He said he was he said he was a neocon at the time. And that's been held against him. And, it's a reason to certainly raise an eyebrow and be like, well, Tucker, you have a history. But it's also possible. I believe in redemption and I believe in forgiveness. And that I'm a Christian, so I believe in all those things. And maybe that's what he's doing now. Maybe he is earnestly trying to redeem himself for his sins of the past. And that moment between him and Steve Bannon, that's what it felt like. It felt like him and Steve Bannon were like trying to talk everyone off the cliff, because it felt like the whole movement was barreling towards this inevitable war with Iran, with U.S. boots on the ground fighting Iran. And they were basically like trying to explain to everyone why that was a terrible idea, which to me just seemed like common sense, but I understand why people get swept up in the emotion of the moment, right? So anyway, important moments in the zeitgeist. That speech he gives at Turning Point USA was big, very big. I still remember how big of a deal everyone made of him going after Epstein, talking about Israel on Charlie Kirk's stage, on Charlie Kirk's platform. And he is now disclosing that he was talking about this with Charlie before walking out there, and said, I'm not going to do that to you because I know it's going to create all kinds of problems for you. You're going to get text messages of people yelling at you for allowing me to do this. And Charlie looked at him and said, do it, go all the way. I'm taking Tucker at his word that he's telling the truth. What he's saying here aligns with what a lot of other people are saying about, Charlie's development, so for lack of a better word, over the past month or two, maybe a few months. And it's almost like Charlie was using Tucker at that point to communicate something that he has been wanting to communicate, but felt like if he did, it would be weaponized against things he cared about, maybe people he cared about, maybe, like it would be detrimental, not only to him personally, but maybe to other things around him that he cared about. So, you can judge him one way or the other for those decisions, but, we're all human. And when you have kids and when you have a wife and kids, I understand why sometimes you have to make decisions that are not as altruistic as they would be if you only had yourself to worry about. So long-winded way of me saying that while I don't retract any of my criticisms of Charlie Kirk, I want to say that I was wrong about Charlie Kirk, because I think the decision to look at Tucker and say, do it, knowing what was going to come from it, which was the text messages, the pressure, the intervention, all the things that we talked about on Tuesday and have happened since, required an extraordinary amount of bravery that most of us will never have to face in our life. We're like that kind of moment where we have to make a decision that is going to cause the world as we know it to come after us. His world to come after him, his donors, the people he respects and cares about to come after him. An incredible amount of bravery. So I respect Charlie Kirk for doing that, and I acknowledge that. So yeah, let's just keep listening, and then I have one more little video I want to share, and then we'll do some news.
The action of the ghoulish and really repulsive reaction of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to Charlie's death basically made it all about him and all about his country immediately. trying to take the energy, the sadness, the grief that people felt over Charlie's murder and redirect it towards support for whatever project he's involved in. And by the way, Benjamin Netanyahu is not the same as the nation of Israel at all. Bibi is despised by many people in Israel. And if you know people who live there, you know that that's true. There are huge divisions within the Israeli government. I mean, there are certain parts of the intel world in Israel that do not support some things that Benjamin Netanyahu has done recently. So it's not the same as attacking Israel, attacking Bibi, but I don't think I've ever seen anything lower than his attempt to hijack Charlie's memory and use it for his own political ends, particularly because what he said was completely untrue. Charlie didn't hate Jews. He loved Jews. He had tons of friends who were Jews. He loved the state of Israel. He loved going there. He did not like Bibi Netanyahu. And he said that to me many times, and he said it to people around him many times. He felt that Bibi Netanyahu was a very destructive force. He was appalled by what was happening in Gaza. He was, above all, resentful that he believed Netanyahu was using the United States to prosecute his wars for the benefit of his country, and that it was shameful and embarrassing and bad for the United States, and he resented it. Didn't hate Netanyahu. He wasn't out there with a placard saying that, but he certainly expressed that to me and a lot of other people. And there's no question that Bibi's defenders on the internet will call me a liar or a kook, but that's a fact. And enough text messages exist that I think it can probably be verified in pretty short order. Not that it needs to be, because that is true. Shortly after that speech, there was a very intense attack on Charlie, and to some extent on me, not that I really noticed, but on him, I have no donors. He had $100 million worth of donors. And so, because he was involved in a different project from just yapping on the internet, which is what I do for a living, he was dependent to a great extent on his donors, of course. It's a nonprofit. And they went after him and tormented him. Not all, of course, many were supportive, but the ones who were offended by my speech, and there was a small, very intense group who were, tormented Charlie Kirk until the day he died. 2 days before he died, he lost a $2 million donation because he had publicly pledged to bring me to the next Turning Point conference in December. And he told me over the past couple of months that he was losing a lot of donations over that pledge. They put out a flyer basically saying that I was going to be at this event giving a speech. And so he would text me and say, man, I'm really taking a lot of heat for this, and people are really mad. The American Jewish Committee called in a statement Charlie Kirk an anti-Semite, and, quote, dangerous. Charlie Kirk, an anti-Semite. Yeah. He was not an anti-Semite. He was the opposite, and he was not dangerous. He was a great lover of people and a purveyor of peace. He was the opposite, and he was very stung by that. Those of us who've been called names for a long time are a little bit harder to offend. Charlie was deeply offended by that and expressed some of those feelings on Megyn Kelly's show and in other places. But that did not let up. The reason I'm telling this story is because he called me and then came to see me at my house about this topic. And I said to him every single time, look, it's, I've got my own way to communicate my views. This is actually not the most important issue to me. There are lots of things I can talk about. I don't need to come to Turning Point. I can take a year off, no problem. I hated seeing how much he was suffering, the hassle he was getting from people, and I was being attacked too. By the way, it was a huge effort. I wasn't fully aware of it, actually, because I don't go online that much, but there was a huge effort by people, some of whom I know and have helped, and like Seth Dillon at the Babylon Bee, for example. Someone who had his own problems with free speech, who was famously canceled. And I like Seth Dillon. I had him on a couple of times. I had dinner with him to show support. Seth Dillon was out there demanding that Charlie Kirk take me off the roster, pull me off stage, because I had said things that Bibi didn't like or that he didn't like or whatever. Shocking that someone whose whole persona is wrapped up in the idea that we all get to speak, and if you don't like it, make a more compelling case, that person and many others like him were advocating for me getting pulled off the stage because they don't like what I'm saying. This is a trend, and one that we should be really concerned about. It's not just about Israel, by the way, at all. The trend is really simple. People with power don't want to hear disagreement. They don't want to be challenged, ever. That's why we have free speech, to acknowledge that even those of us or people with less power still have a right to talk because they're human beings. You don't own them. So time after time, Charlie would call me or come to see me, and let me know. Wow, or show me text messages. These people are really mad that you're speaking. And I would always have the same thought, like, I feel pretty moderate, actually. I've never been an Israel hater. Obviously, I'm not an anti-Semite. I just don't want more wars, and I don't want a foreign country humiliating my country and telling us what our laws have to be. I mean, this seems like pretty basic America First stuff, and he would say, I totally agree with you, but they want you off the stage. And I would always say, no problem. And he would say, no, it's important. It's a matter of principle. I want you to be there. Great. By the way, I'm not accusing anyone of being involved in that murder. I'm not trying to mutter darkly or imply anything. There's a lot we don't know about who murdered Charlie and why, but I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But I think it's important to say that out loud because it's a fact, and there are many liars out there trying, Bibi Netanyahu, number one among them, shamefully, who are trying to distort the truth, a truth that I know and can prove. And the last thing I'll say about Charlie.
Yeah, and so he goes on to the last thing he says right there, which I don't think we need to watch, but it is equally powerful as he goes on to talk about how Charlie had developed this almost like resentment towards the current financial system and like the current economic system, and how, because obviously he's spending a lot of time with younger people. That's like his target demo. And he understands how none of them are going to ever own anything, and they're all going to be in debt. And Tucker is going on to say how it's almost like a socialist, like, you know, he would be accused of being a socialist for like saying that. But he's getting into the Bill Ackman thing. Like, why is Bill Ackman rich? Like, Bill Ackman is worth billions of dollars because he's hyper aggressive and he's well connected. And, you know, he shorts the market, right? He shorts the market and the market goes down, and then he makes a boatload of money. And he's like, that is a sign of a very sick economy when those are the people, like a sick civilization, when those are the people who get super rich are the ones who really are really aggressive and are very well connected. And Charlie was recognizing that and was developing new ideas on like what the future should look like. And I think that we should all kind of carry that forward, because we've all been psyoped and conditioned into believing that it's like capitalism versus communism, to steal Tucker's little voice that he does. But it's not. It's you know, we don't live in a capitalist society. We live in a crony capitalist society, a highly regulated market where you and I can't go out and start a cell phone company. We can't go out and start an airline. We can't go out and start all kinds of businesses because of not only the red tape, but you have to get approvals. You have to apply. And then a regulatory agency that is ultimately controlled by the industry itself has to approve your application. And the other players aren't going to let you into their market because they don't know you and they don't trust you and they don't like you, which is why you're stuck with like 3 airlines anytime you have to fly somewhere. Whereas if you go to Europe, you get infinite number of airlines and options, and their prices reflect that. They're much lower. The experience tends to be much higher end experience. You get, you know, on an hour-and-a-half flight, they'll give you lunch, all that kind of. I've run through those rants before. But anyway, like, I thought that was really fascinating. I haven't gone back and had a chance to listen to the Tucker Charlie like interview that they did. He put an episode out with Charlie a few months ago, and really the reason I didn't listen to it is because you know, my thoughts on Charlie at the time. But I need to go back and listen to it now because I'm sure I probably would learn something about it. But, you know, this is me just saying that I was wrong, and I just want to own that. And I think we all should get better about doing that when we are wrong. So I was wrong about, I guess you would say, Charlie's character. You know, his public positions on that he presented. I don't take my criticisms of that back, because I was saying that in earnest at the time, and I still mean it. But anyway, I just thought it was worth taking the opportunity to say that. The other video that I wanted to share is from an interview between Max Blumenthal and Judge Napolitano. Y'all know that I do listen to Napolitano's show, and Max Blumenthal is someone who I, you know, he does good reporting, it seems like. You know, mixed feelings on him, of course. I don't assign anybody like authority, like when it comes to information. Information is information, whether even when Colonel McGregor says things, it's like I take it in my head and I internalize it, but I don't take it always as gospel. If it aligns with other data that I'm seeing out there and it fits in perfectly, it's like, okay, well then that probably is, for now I can take that and run with it. But it's like everything is just information, and the messenger can certainly qualify that information, but we don't want to take anybody as above reproach, so to speak. But Max Blumenthal, for those who are not aware, he is very anti-Israel, which is one of the reasons he's a regular guest on Napolitano's show. He has been extremely critical of President Trump because of Trump's pro Netanyahu positions, right? But I've also seen him be very pro Trump as well, like a year and a half ago, because he was also very anti-Biden and anti Kamala and all that. So I don't know if I can call him completely objective. I don't know if he is or if he isn't, but I wanted to clarify for those who aren't familiar with who this person is. He's going to talk a little bit about what we were just listening to with Tucker from a different perspective. He's going to talk about the Trump White House, which he has some insight there that I think is interesting. And yeah, we'll just listen to it and then we'll talk about it for a minute and then we'll do the news.
One of my sources is collapsing and is so murky.
Okay. So yeah, I want to get him talking about the FBI story and like the shooting and all that, like not the shooting itself, but just the psyops and the fallout and all that.
Crazy, because he's under so much pressure from Netanyahu's cutout.
Okay, so actually, I want to back up a little more. So this part, when he's talking about what is it? I think it's Napolitano asks him a question and he responds to it. Let me see if I can get Napolitano's question.
Means, and so it all kind of fits together.
Why do you think Netanyahu felt the need to go on national television and expressly deny that Israel assassinated Kirk? I mean, who does that?
Yeah. Why do millions of people, I mean, you see it all over social media, they think Israel had some involvement because of the way they've been conducting themselves around the world in the region. Netanyahu's not just waging a seven-front war, he's carrying out an assassination spree in broad daylight all across the region, including inside a U.S. ally. And you have this record of Charlie Kirk, which backs up everything I heard on Background, going out in public. And you can see he's anguished. He's angry. He's almost like on the verge of going crazy because he's under so much pressure from Netanyahu's cutouts in the United States. So, people are taking the reality and to another level where it's an unsubstantiated theory. I have no evidence that Israel had any role in Charlie Kirk's assassination, but they're taking it there because of what they know about Israel and its capabilities and its ruthlessness. And along with the fact that the official story just keeps collapsing and is so murky and filled with contradictions that no one knows really what to make of any of this.
Did you learn from your sources if Kirk believed that President Trump was frightened of Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, I don't know what Kirk thought, and I've never met him, even though I've been following him for about 10 years. One of my sources knows people in the White House. I mean, the Trump White House is very accessible, I should say. I mean, I've gotten sources in there, like very good sources, and I can tell you some of the things that they've been saying. But this one particular source has said that, and this is something I've been hearing around Trump's circle for years. Trump was always afraid of assassination because of all the attacks that he was under, because he was always compared to Hitler and so on. Then he faces a real assassination attempt. So of course he's afraid of that. He's very afraid of Netanyahu and his capabilities. And during one of Netanyahu's many trips to Washington this year, Israeli agents placed electronic devices on Secret Service emergency response vehicles on 2 separate occasions. This is what source told me with very
and did the Secret Service arrest these Israeli agents?
They found the devices. And this is what I was told by a Trump insider. So I can't call up, if I called up the Secret Service and asked them to confirm this, they just wouldn't even acknowledge it. It's not something that's going to happen. But there's a precedent there. The precedent is in 2019, 3 high-ranking former U.S. officials told Politico that Israel had done the exact same thing, placing Stingray cell phone surveillance devices around the White House and in sensitive locations throughout Washington to surveil Donald Trump's phone communications. Now, who would get access to those locations? First of all, you can't just send, Shlomo Mossad up in there. He's not going to get access. But Benjamin Netanyahu has access, and his own security team. And actually, in 2017, Boris Johnson, the former Israeli prime minister, wrote in his memoir that Netanyahu went into his personal toilet and left a surveillance device, a listening device, that British security, his personal security, found a listening device after Netanyahu used his personal toilet. This was reported in the Telegraph, the British Telegraph, which is a pro-Israel publication. So I would have just dismissed this, but there's just such a strong precedent there. And it frightens people inside the White House when you have this foreign intelligence agency, which is carrying out a genocide, which can basically funds your campaigns through cutouts like Miriam Adelson. Netanyahu is calling it into the White House, demanding personnel changes all the time. That's what I've heard. And you think you can defy them and not provide them weapons when they are in this war that they think is the most important existential war in the history of Israel? No, you can't just do that. So it stands to reason that Trump is afraid. And that's what I was told by an insider with access to Trump.
You think more is going to come out on all this? I mean, you've been researching this since Charlie was murdered for 4 days now.
Well, it's not. It's after I put out the first story, I just started getting more information that I never expected to have, that dovetailed with rumors that I was seeing on social media and provided detail to them. And this, I think, is kind of just it's a history about this U.S.-Israel special relationship that's being uncovered right now that shows just how it's collapsed, is completely collapsed. Because I think when you lose Charlie Kirk, I don't mean physically, but when they lost him politically, or if they lost him politically and he starts refusing your funding, refusing Netanyahu's offer to fund his organization to the hilt, which was what I told he did, then you've lost the game.
Did he refuse to fly to Israel and meet with Netanyahu?
That's what I was told. And that's what Candace Owens, who is a lot closer to Charlie Kirk than me, just said on her live stream, that he rejected that offer. So Netanyahu delivered a video eulogy to Charlie Kirk and held this letter that he said he sent him, inviting him to Israel, to Jerusalem, 2 weeks before his death. Why would you do that if Charlie Kirk refused? Like, how much of a sick sociopath do you have to be? But then again, Bill Ackman, the day after Charlie Kirk was killed, took to Twitter X to declare that he had a meal this summer with Charlie Kirk and spent time with him, and he was a giant of a man. I mean, how deranged do you have to be to say that, when the reality was that this was described as an intervention in which Charlie Kirk was hammered by Bill Ackman and put under all this pressure, which poured out into that Megyn Kelly interview? I mean, we're dealing with real sociopaths here.
Max, you are second to none when it comes to the skullduggery you go through, your personal courage.
Yeah, so that pretty much wraps that. And yeah, I mean, notice that like Max acknowledges, he says, the Trump White House is actually very accessible. Like, it's it's easy to get to people who are in the White House, and they'll speak to you. And it's like he's been very critical of the Trump White House because of the pro-Israel position. So like when I heard him say that, I was like, okay, like, again, integrity. That's what we look for. And it's hard to find people who are objective. And I don't know if anybody is actually fully objective. I think everyone has their own personal bias when it comes to pretty much everything. But information, we're just taking in information. Now, do I think that Trump is afraid of Netanyahu? I don't know. That might be a strong statement, but hyper aware of how ruthless Netanyahu is. I mean, we just saw him bomb Qatar to try to kill the Hamas leaders, right? So I was trying to find what happened to that. I had a video pulled up that Netanyahu had posted, because they this interview was from a few days ago, and when they talk about Netanyahu going on national television to talk about deny involvement, they're referring to the Gretchen interview, right? But that's not. But then after that, Netanyahu, like yesterday or 2 days ago, I think it was, he actually went and put out a second video that I saw, where he did the same. It was very strange, and I don't know if did they delete it from X. This is very, very strange. Just give me 1 second. I need to figure this out. This is very strange because I mean, am I living Here it is. Okay. Yeah, so it's no longer on his. I couldn't find it on his I couldn't find it on his X account. He definitely posted it to his X account because I posted it on my Telegram page, but this other person had copied the video, saved the video, and then re-uploaded it. And so I found it here. So it's the same video. It's 2 minutes long. We're going to listen to this, and then we'll talk about it. And then I promise we'll move on to the news.
Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, said that the bigger the lie, the faster it will spread. Well, somebody has fabricated a monstrous big lie that Israel had something to do with Charlie Kirk's horrific murder. This is insane. It is false. It is outrageous. Charlie Kirk was a giant, a once-in-a-century talent who defended freedom, defended America, defended our common Judeo-Christian civilization. Charlie loved Israel. He loved the Jewish people. He told me so in a letter that he sent me just a few months ago. One of my greatest joys as a Christian, he said, is advocating for Israel and forming alliances with Jews to protect Judeo-Christian civilization. He encouraged me to make the case directly to the American people about how vital Israel is to U.S. national security. He told me, the Holy Land is so important to my life, it pains me to see support for Israel slip away. Now, if Charlie disagreed with a policy of mine or a decision here and there, not only did I not mind, I welcomed it. This is the essence of Charlie. This is the essence of a free country. It's exactly what Charlie stood for. And I knew that his suggestions always came from the heart, from his love for Israel and from his love for the Jewish people. A few weeks before his death, I spoke to Charlie. I invited him to visit Israel again. And sadly, that won't happen. Now some are peddling these disgusting rumors, perhaps out of obsession, perhaps with Qatari funding. What I do know is this: Charlie Kirk was a great man, and a great man deserves honor, not lies. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. May your memory be a blessing.
Yeah, maybe with Qatari funding. You hear that? It's Qatari funding. That's the reason that, yeah, for what it's worth, you know, Nick Fuentes is out there ridiculing people for making these suggestions, ridiculing people for suggesting that maybe Israel was involved here. He says that it was definitely a lefty, like a tranny leftist shooter, and we should just accept what the FBI says. You know, despite the fact that he spent years accusing Trump of being a Israel puppet and all that, because I hear about that from all of his followers who will come in and attack me for supporting Donald Trump, despite acknowledging that our special relationship with Israel is extremely detrimental to our society. Yeah, and you know, maybe that's just Nick being aware. Like maybe that's just Nick watching Charlie get shot in front of his family and realizing how real this all is, and just out of fear, you know, taking the safe road because he doesn't want to, you know, I'm pretty sure somebody went to his house or something, and I think somebody was killed in that whole situation. I don't remember the exact details, but I think he's lived through some sort of a situation like assassination attempt, or at least a confrontation attempt. Or, you know, maybe there's a more nefarious explanation there. I don't know. But it's just worth pointing out that when Netanyahu says that, it's not the typical anti-Israel people who are saying this stuff. It's not like Nick Fuentes, his official position is not only is it his official position, he's like ridiculing people who are even exploring that as a possibility. And that's telling. It's very telling. For whatever reason, that's very telling. Akalu 9 says, "Oh my God, this is so interesting and confusing at the same time. Straighten me out here, Ghost. I wish I could. I don't have answers. I'm not going to sit here. If other people on the internet want to tell you that they know exactly what's going on and they have all the answers because they have insider sources, or you know they're extracting information from Q drops or whatever it is, fine. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell you that I know exactly what's going on here. I don't. But my intuition is leading me in certain ways. I put out a long post on X responding to Martyr Maid, who is Daryl Cooper, Very smart guy. He's one of other. I discovered him through Tucker because Tucker had interviewed him. He's the one that Tucker interviewed, the glasses, who made like the comments about Winston Churchill, and then everyone went nuts. That was months ago. But he basically was like echoing what Nick was saying, and just saying that you're an idiot if you only a dummy would indulge this Israel theory. And my response to that was just, well, that's a knee-jerk reaction. Calling the theory dumb because you think it's contrived, or it leans on old tropes, or it just seems too far-fetched or too grand of a conspiracy for it to be real. That's really silly. That's really, really silly. Because you're not engaging. That's just a knee-jerk reaction. You're not engaging in the actual merits of the argument, or like countering the actual theory. You're just reacting in almost like an emotional way. And by the way, that's the same reaction people had in 24 years ago to 9/11. When 9/11 happened and people were suggesting the government was involved in that, and people were like, well, that's insane. Why would you even think the government's involved in that? Like you're a dummy, and we should just disregard everything you said because of that. No, I think that's actually, now's the time that we should be listening to every single potential theory. And I don't know if what I'm saying is accurate. Like, I don't know, maybe it does turn out to be like a trendy leftist, right? But if we don't have the conversation and we aren't platforming the idea and entertaining all the different perspectives, then we really are doing a big disservice to the pursuit of truth, which is what we're after here. And actually, I think I wanted to go back to Blumenthal real quick, because Blumenthal said something really interesting that I don't think we got to, because I cut it off. He said something about Trump's relationship with the FBI that I think was very interesting, considering it was coming from, again, Max Blumenthal, who's been very critical of Trump. So let's just indulge me for another few minutes, and then we'll go to a commercial break and come back and do the news. Let's listen.
All of these profound issues and interrelated factors here. I can't thank you enough. I know you're going to be doing some other things for a day or so, but if more of this comes out and you want this audience, please let us know. You have it at your disposal.
Let me just say one thing that I've been hearing from a Trump administration source, like someone who's in the a Trump administration official, and I've heard this from other areas close to the Trump administration, which is that they don't really feel like they're hearing enough from the FBI. The FBI is not being transparent. And that's the way that the American people feel about this. And so the longer that goes on.
Oh, transparent over what?
They're not sharing information. They're not like, they want to see like video of the muzzle flash from the roof and see where the shot came from. And since that's not forthcoming, even at the highest level, the public is becoming more, I hate to say it, but conspiratorial. And this is just going to fester until we get some answers. So what we need are answers, and we need a real investigation into this. And we need a real investigation into the Ryan Ruth assassination attempt, since he was connected to Ukraine and its international legion and was having meetings on Capitol Hill. It's very strange how that one was buried, as well as the Butler, Pennsylvania shooting. That one just kind of went away. And
do the people in the White House fear that Robinson did not pull the trigger that propelled the fatal shot?
I think that anyone who's not getting answers, who's in the administration, has a lot of suspicion and questions about what's going on. But let me again say, I'm totally content to believe the official story if it's proven, if it's demonstrated, if we get some evidence. But where is that? And also, and additionally, I have no evidence that Israel played any role. I'm not here saying that, but consider how the public is going to react here when we live in this digital panopticon where everything around us is filmed through active or passive surveillance. Cell phones were everywhere filming Charlie Kirk along with real cameras, and we still have missing angles.
So about 2 hours ago, Dan Bongino told Fox News that they're looking for an accomplice.
I don't even know who to trust. I mean, do we trust this podcaster guy? But yeah,
he's a podcaster guy, but he's number 2 in the FBI.
Yeah, right? I mean, he's certainly
unhappy, but he's there.
And Kash Patel said that there was a manifesto left by Tyler Robinson, but it has disappeared or destroyed, and they're going to try to forensically reconstruct it. Look, everything could come together by tomorrow, but right now, there isn't enough there to clearly convict a lone wolf shooter. And therefore, the public is going to develop its own theories.
Yeah. So I wanted to play all that because I think that's really important to hear. And here's why. Because, you heard Blumenthal there. Max called Bongino the podcaster guy. Like I said, he is not a Trump apologist. This guy is not a Trump apologist at all. Right. And yet he kind of is throwing them Trump a lifeline by saying, according to his source in the Trump White House, they're like the administration is not getting information from the FBI. The FBI is withholding information from Trump. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's Bongino and Cash withholding information from Trump. That means that could mean that it's the people who are operating underneath Cash and Bongino, who are assigned on the case, whatever. I mean, we saw what the FBI did during the first Trump administration. It was very clear that Donald Trump, like the earnest patriots in the administration, did not have control over the FBI, or at least the entire FBI, based on what happened in the first administration. So it would be very foolish for us to assume that we now have full control over the FBI at this point, which is why, again, like as Max said, I'm perfectly content to believe the official story if the evidence is presented and it all adds up. But, last night on SitRep, CanCon and Alpha had Zeb Boykin on there, who's the guy who he put together a pretty compelling video about potentially the shot coming from a different direction. Very compelling. I'm not sold and like one way or the other, but it was a really good conversation. And they did come to a consensus on a lot of different parts of the official narrative and how the official narrative doesn't make sense. Okay. So we just need to keep an open mind, and we need to be asking questions and demanding answers. And that doesn't mean that the answers we're going to get are going to be like, we don't accept it just because we're given it. Like, oh, okay, well, that must be the truth. It must make sense. Okay. And yeah. So anyway, I thought that was worth all of you hearing. So anyway, take it for what it is. Let's see. I have 1 second. I need to upload. Bear with me for 1 minute. We got. Okay. All right. So we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will just get in the news. Geopolitics goes.
Got that right.
Deodorant should do more than cover you up. It should protect you all day long.
Dude, the deodorant stick is legit. I like the mint one. And, you go work out and you kind of get you get funky if you work out. Dude, like at the end of my workout, like I'm sweating, shirt got all those sweat. I'm like, dude, I still smell good. Like, I absolutely love it. If you guys haven't tried it, try it.
That's the difference with Soft Disclosure. No aluminum, no chemicals, just clean, natural ingredients that fight odor and keep you fresh through every workout, every meeting, every moment.
I've always struggled with the you can't use aluminum deodorant because you're going to die if you use it kind of thing, because all of the non-aluminum deodorant products suck pretty much. Yeah. This is different. This is all day. You're all day good, and you're not putting any of that disgusting chemicals right near your lymph nodes.
Soft Disclosure deodorant, real protection, real freshness, built on truth. Available in mint and lemon grapefruit. Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Badlands for 15% off.
Soft Disclosure.
Introducing Silent. Empower your right to disconnect with silent Faraday cage bags. In a world where tech never sleeps, our mission is to keep you safe, private, and healthy. Our patented technology shields your devices from hacking, tracking, and EMF radiation, giving you autonomy over your digital life. Disconnecting sparks creativity, strengthens relationships, and brings peace of mind. With Silent, you get effortless gear built with integrity, always staying one step ahead to protect your data with security. Choose Silent, reclaim your freedom to disconnect. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/Faraday and use promo code Badlands to tag your 10% discount. That's badlandsmedia.tv/Faraday, promo code Badlands. All right. We are back. Geopolitics with Ghost for the second hour. September 19th, 2025. Okay, so since we were already talking about Netanyahu, let's go ahead and just do a quick story on him. There might be more. I think there's more than one, but and then I see there's some really good news here, or interesting news with Russia and Trump. Okay, so I'm just pulling up the Badlands news brief because I know I have the video here. If you aren't reading the Badlands news brief, Ash puts it together every day. She does a great job. She'll go around and pull people's takes, like the Badlands host various takes from their social media, and then her and I both write articles exclusively for the news brief. Some of the takes that I put in here, I also put on social media, but a lot of them I don't. So if you want more of my geopolitical takes, this is where you will find them, on the Badlands news brief on the Badlands Media Substack. So this is a video that was put out. I think it came out yesterday, but it was part of a longer video where Netanyahu was. I did actually see this as I was scrolling his X feed trying to find the video on Charlie Kirk. And this is like a 12-second version of a 12-second clip from it, but let's watch this real quick.
So we are going to produce an independent arms industry, very powerful, very strong, that can withstand any kind of international political constraints and will provide security for the state of Israel. This is what I envision for the state.
Okay. So let's see. Hopefully the sound on that came through. Sometimes when I play videos like from the actual websites, like whether it's Substack or somewhere else, the sound doesn't come through. So let me know if the sound didn't come through. But if it didn't come through, basically what he says is that we are going to build Israel needs to create an independent weapons industry that can withstand international constraints, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said, as pressure mounts on his country over the war in Gaza. So basically he wants to build Israel wants to make its own defense industry so they can make their own weapons. And as I explained in my take, here's the problem. Israel doesn't have a real manufacturing base. I've already explained this on this show before, but it would take not being an expert in this kind of analysis, but having spent many years in the construction industry, in the architectural design industry, and just knowing from those perspectives, like how long it takes to take an idea from somebody's head and bring it to fruition. If they were to dedicate themselves to building just the factories that they need to make the weapons, I think they're 3 to 5 years away from making their first weapon because they don't have the factories right now. Okay. But the bigger deal here is that they don't make steel. They don't make aluminum. They don't make plastics. They don't make concrete. They don't make rubber. They don't make any of the things that you need, not only to make the weapons, but to make the factories that are going to make the weapons. All that stuff, all those construction materials, Israel imports from other countries because they don't have a manufacturing industry that like over there. So as I explained in the take, there are three biggest industries. I found a report from 2017 that was put out by the Israeli government. And according to them, their three biggest exports their three biggest, it says $45 billion in exports in 2017, and their three biggest industries in their economy are software, which I already knew, software, 27% of their GDP, pharmaceutical products, which are chemicals. So they're creating chemicals that are then used, like raw chemicals that are then used in pharmaceutical products like pills and stuff, medicine. That's 16% of their GDP. And electrical components, like small electrical components, which is 12% of their GDP. And then if you like, here's a pie chart that shows the rest of their, let me make this a little bigger. See if I can get this on a different page. Yeah, here we go. See, so I don't know if y'all can read that, but I'm going to read every single thing. I'm not going to read all the percentages. I kind of gave you the three big ones there. I'm just going to read every single thing that makes up their economy. It's pharmaceutical products, electrical components, telecommunications equipment, aircraft, electronic and optical equipment, medical and surgical equipment, computing equipment, services for the high-tech industry, telecommunication services, computing softwares, R&D services, like and it says in parentheses, startup companies, and exports from startup companies. Okay. And the only ones that are double digits are the three that I already said. And then the fourth one would be R&D services, startup companies, 10%. Okay. Everything else is 8% or lower. And that 8% one is electronic and optical equipment. So again, you're talking about really, really small manufacturing small parts that go into, telescopes or equipment that's used in medical procedures, like surgical equipment, computers, like that kind of, like it's very specialized, like high tech. That they specialize in high tech. That's what their whole economy is built around. And it's because there's no natural resources in Israel, as I've explained before. There's no natural resources in Israel. So they have to import all the raw materials that they use to then build buildings or manufacture stuff. Again, like before you even build the factories to make the weapons, you got to cultivate some sort of assembly, like some sort of a logistics line, so that you have materials that are going to be consistently feeding these factories to pump out these weapons. And then not to mention, like if you're going to be making bullets, how much gunpowder do you make? It's like, I've seen some commentary, like we don't need to pull it up, like reaction to this, like industry commentary. And they're all like, are you high? Like, what do you think? What are you thinking, Netanyahu? And then other like economic critics are saying this is going to devastate these three big industries that are right here: software, pharmaceutical products, and electrical components. It's going to devastate because those industries are going to be impacted because resources that would be allocated to them are going to be allocated to this, and it's just going to like gut their economy. Their economy is already like a total nightmare right now. It's a total disaster because the people who own all these businesses or work for these businesses are being conscripted into the IDF. And that's causing these businesses to either fail or to go into bankruptcy, or they're, suspending their services or whatever. But it's a total economic disruptor right now. So anyway, I thought that was a really interesting development. They're going to pursue their own weapons industry. And I guess that's because they're becoming economic or geopolitically isolated, as we talked about on Tuesday. And so with that, I think there's two other stories that we should talk about is related to Israel. One of them is the story about Netanyahu coming to the White House. Netanyahu. And that is right here. Okay, so Netanyahu says Trump to host him on September 29th. Issues dire warning to Hamas over hostages. I think Trump confirmed this during his meeting with Keir Starmer yesterday. I think there was like a question he received. I saw a soundbite where Trump confirmed that Netanyahu was going to come, I believe. Says U.S. President Donald Trump invited Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to meet him at the White House later this month. The Israeli leader said at a Tuesday press conference in Jerusalem, while warning Hamas against harming hostages as the military operates in Gaza City. According to Netanyahu, the visit will take place on September 29th, 3 days after the premier's scheduled address at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. So it sounds like he's going to be addressing, let me just pull my calendar up. So if he's coming on the 29th, that's not this coming Monday, but the following Monday. And it says that's 3 days after he's going to address the UN General Assembly. So that 3 days before that is going to be the Friday, I believe, if I'm counting correctly. So the 26th, so next Friday, a week from today, I guess he's going to address the UN General Assembly. That is going to be appointment television because the other story I want to share is related to that because the UN is not happy right now with Netanyahu or Israel. Well, that's an interesting little story I just saw. Okay, we should probably talk about that too. As I'm pulling up this other one, saw something interesting, but we will do this UN story first since I just teased it. And that would be from Arab News. U.S. again vetoes UN Security Council resolution demanding permanent Gaza ceasefire. It says it marks the sixth time that the U.S. has used its power of veto to block such a move since the war between Israel and Hamas began nearly 2 years ago. The other 14 members of the council voted in favor of the resolution, which was tabled by its 10 elected members. Yes, the way the UN Security Council works is there's 15 members, right? 5 of them are permanent and 10 of them are elected. And so there's like a rotation of these elected members of other nations that are on the Security Council. But the 5 that are the permanent are basically the 5 winners of World War II. That would be, I think plus Germany, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just ask ChatGPT that. I think it's the U.S., Britain, France, China, Russia. The U.S., Britain, France, China, and Russia. I think those are the 5. The 5 permanent. I'm just going to fact check that. UN Security Council members. I don't want to report fake news. I'm not CNN or Fox. Yeah, China, France, Russia, Britain, and the U.S. So the five winners of World War II. Because remember, China was our ally in World War II, as was Russia. Japan was the enemy. Okay, and so I believe the 5 permanent members all have veto power, so they can veto any resolution that's brought on. Any one of the 5 members can hit a button and veto the whole thing, no matter what. They have automatic veto power, as I understand it. And this is the sixth time that the U.S. has used its veto power to block this kind of a vote on a forced ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. I think the other 5 times all happened under Biden. There might have been one earlier this year that happened under Trump, but I think the other 5 happened under Biden. Okay, so the U.S. on Thursday vetoed a UN Security Council resolution that called for immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, as well as lifting all restrictions on humanitarian aid deliveries to the enclave. The draft resolution tabled by the 10 elected members of the 15-member council received 14 votes in favor. It was the 6th time since the start of the war between Israel and Hamas nearly 2 years ago. The U.S. has used the power of veto as it holds as one of the 5 permanent members of the council. The veto was delivered by U.S. Representative Morgan Ortagus, a member we talked about her last week, and the resolution maybe it was Tuesday. And the resolution therefore failed despite the near unanimous support. Washington has consistently argued that UN ceasefire resolutions risk undermining peace negotiations on the ground, as well as Israel's ability to take action against Hamas and its right to self-defense. Critics accuse U.S. authorities of shielding Israel from international accountability. Quote, colleagues, U.S. opposition to this resolution will come as no surprise. Ortegas, a senior U.S. policy advisor, said before the vote, quote, "It fails to condemn Hamas or recognize Israel's right to defend itself, and it wrongly legitimizes the false narratives benefiting Hamas, which have sadly found currency in this council." Other council members quote unquote, ignored U.S. warnings about the unacceptable language and instead adopted performative action designed to draw a veto, she added. The text of the resolution expressed alarm at reports of a growing famine and worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, condemned the use of starvation as a weapon of war, and voiced concern over the expansion of Israeli military operations. It also reaffirmed obligations on states under the principles of international law, including the protection of civilians and the rejection of forced displacements. It demanded 3 key measures: an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire agreement respected by all parties, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas and other groups, and the lifting of all Israeli restrictions on the entry and distribution of humanitarian aid, alongside the restoration of essential services in Gaza. It asked the UN Secretary General to report back to the Council within 30 days on implementation of the resolution. So remember it was last Friday that we talked about this, that Ortegas stood up and denounced it was that vote to adopt the New York Declaration, which was 142 countries voting in favor of that Saudi-French declaration, the agreement that the Arab League had come up with, where Hamas was going to surrender to the Palestinian Authority and surrender their weapons, release all the hostages, do all the things that Morgan Ortega said she wants to like the U.S. wants to see happen. And like the UN is like, the Arabs are all sitting there like, what are we doing here? Like, you're making demands. We are reinforcing your demands, siding with you effectively against Hamas. And then you're accusing us of being like Hamas sympathizers. Yeah, it's all so shameful. And it's really just disgusting that we have to like live through all this. But I think this is all necessary. I think we have to show everybody what it is we're dealing with. We have to show everybody the pressures and the forces that were acting against Charlie Kirk at the end of his life, whether or not that contributed to his assassination, to his demise. Those are the forces that were and the pressures that he was living under at the end of his life. This kind of insanity that Morgan Ortegas is, putting on display at the UN. I just saw this story, so I think it's worth just looking at. Says Trump tells aides Netanyahu, quote unquote, fucking kidding me, like, excuse the language, but won't publicly break with him. Report: U.S. President's public accommodation of Israel belies private frustration over ongoing Gaza war and attack on Hamas leaders in Qatar. The Wall Street Journal says U.S. President Donald Trump recently told top aides that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is effing kidding me, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal on Thursday. The report said that despite the American leader's frustrations with the Israeli premier, he is unlikely to publicly break with him. The comment reportedly came as Trump spoke to senior aides, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, about how to respond to Israel's strike against Hamas leaders in Doha, Qatar, earlier this month. The U.S. expressed disapproval of the attack, which apparently failed to kill at least some of the senior officials it was targeting. It said Israel only informed American officials once it was too late to avert the strike, though Axios reported earlier this week, citing Israeli officials, that this wasn't true. Okay, so now Israel is calling the Trump administration liars. In the wake of the strike, Trump and top U.S. officials met with the Qatari prime minister, and Rubio flew to Israel, then Qatar, to discuss it. Trump also praised the Gulf Emirati as a great ally. I think they mean the Gulf Emirates as a great ally, and pledged that Israel won't attack. Or no, I'm sorry, Qatar is a Gulf Emirate, so that's the correct language. Praised the Gulf Emirate, which is Qatar, as a great ally. And pledge that Israel won't attack on its soil again. The journal report noted, however, the U.S. president is broadly accommodating of Netanyahu's decisions, even when they appear to contradict the White House's stated goals with respect to the war in Gaza and Middle East relations more broadly. Netanyahu said Wednesday that he was invited to join Trump at the White House next week amid the UN General Assembly. The premier said the invitation came during a phone call on Monday and that he had held several conversations with Trump since Israel's September 9th a strike on Hamas leaders in Qatar, and all of them were good. unlike his predecessor Joe Biden, Trump has declined to put public pressure on Israel to reach a deal with Hamas for an end to the war. In June, after the U.S. brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, after the brief war launched by Israel to cripple the Islamic Republic's nuclear and ballistic missile programs, Trump told reporters both countries, quote, have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the F they're doing. With respect to Gaza, however, the U.S. president has opted to endorse Israeli military operations in Gaza and to issue threats against the terror group, demanding it turn over its hostages. The hostages it abducted in its October 7, 2023 assault in Israel, which started the ongoing war. Yeah, and so, well, here's a quote. It says, it's slightly baffling and counterintuitive. Shlalom Lipner, a think tank fellow who served for decades in the prime minister's office, told the Journal, quote, Netanyahu's moves have prolonged the Gaza war, created trouble for Trump with other U.S. allies in the region, and made the expansion of the Abraham Accords excruciatingly difficult, end quote, he added, referring to a series of normalization agreements between Israel and Muslim nations that the U.S. brokered during Trump's first term in office. The White House declined to comment on the report. A senior Israeli official told the Journal any reports of acrimony between Trump and Netanyahu are fake news, adding that American Israeli interests are closely aligned. Yeah, so my read on this is what it's always been, is that they're actually kind of telling you as directly as they ever have. And everyone's kind of scratching their head saying, well, what's going on here? Why is Trump saying that Netanyahu is screwing him over while supporting him? Well, I think Trump's just letting Netanyahu destroy himself, or letting Netanyahu destroy, if you want to buy into the our boy Yuhu idea, which, again, I think that our boy, I align with Chris Paul in the idea that it's our boy Yuhu, meaning Trump wants Netanyahu as the leader of Israel right now because he knows that Netanyahu is going to pursue an aggressive agenda that is going to ultimately be self-destructive to the Zionist cause. And the Zionist cause obviously is a problem that has to be dealt with now as opposed to 15 years from now. It needs to be dealt with right now. We have to deal with the Zionist problem. Because not only is it going to impact the Middle East in a negative way, it also obviously has a stranglehold on U.S. foreign policy, and that needs to be torn out root and stem. All that's being exposed right now. I think you're watching that be exposed in real time. And rather than Donald Trump holding a press conference and explaining to you, here's what's going on, he's just letting it all expose itself. And now the truth just becomes self-evident and undeniable. And nobody can deny this is happening now, not even Donald Trump. Interesting that, the whole idea that, because it was reported the other day, Netanyahu was like, well, I've been invited to come speak at the White House. I'm going to come visit the White House. And everyone was like, well, why is Trump inviting Netanyahu to the White House? Like, this just seems like more placation. Well, he's already going to be in the country because he's going to address the UN General Assembly, which is his right as a member of the UN. Any of the sovereign leaders have a right to give a speech at the UN General Assembly. So he's exercising that right. He spoke there last year, by the way. That was when he held up the famous, the blessing and the curse pictures. Remember when he held that up? The blessing being the Arab Peninsula and the curse being Iran and its, Iran and the, its neighbors, like Persia, basically. Syria was included in that. Lebanon was included in that. Syria, of course, now has gone back to the Arabs, which MBS has been orchestrating. But that's interesting. He's going to be in the U.S. anyway, so yeah, come to the White House, and we'll see what comes of that situation, that moment. There was also something from Mike Huckabee that I think we need to watch, because it's a little nauseating, but it's news. And this is turning into a longer Israel segment than I anticipated, but is what it is. Yeah, I don't want the 8-minute version. I don't want the 8-minute version of Huckabee's comments. I want the 1-minute version. Where's the 1-minute clip? Here it is. So yeah, so Huckabee spoke. It's 2 minutes, but we'll watch it on 1.5 speed. Yeah, Huckabee spoke at the opening ceremony of the Pilgrimage Road, whatever that is. So listen to what he says here.
What an honor to be here for this incredible ceremony. Mr. Prime Minister, Secretary Rubio, all of the wonderful people who made this possible by their generosity, contributing to something that is historic and something that is a living memorial of what God has done. It was 4,000 years ago here in this city on Mount Moriah where God chose his people. He not only chose a people, but he chose a place. And then he chose for the people in this place a purpose. The people were the Jewish people. The place was Israel. And the purpose was to be a light to the world and to show that we don't have to look for God because he is looking for us. And that is what so separates the long history of why this city is so important. Those of us who are not Jewish, we thank you for giving all of us a foundation of morality and decency and civilization upon which our own faith is built. For without yours, we don't have one. As I often tell my Jewish friends, you can be Jewish, you don't need me. But I cannot be who I am in my faith without the debt of obligation that I owe to you for having listened to God and been willing to be obedient to him when he called you to this place as his people.
All right, so he already said the thing that I wanted to discuss, and that was the foundation of morality and God's chosen people in Mount Moriah. So when he's referring to Mount Moriah, the people who are familiar with the Bible, and by the way, I've been listening to The Bible in a Year, which is a podcast by a guy named Father Mike Schmitz. Jim Quast recommends it. He's recommended it on my show when he's come on. But I started listening to it. It's like 20-minute episodes, and he basically breaks up the Bible into 365 parts. And so over the course of 1 year, one lesson a day or one reading a day from the Bible, he reads the entire Bible in a year, 20 minutes, like 20-minute episodes. So you can easily listen to multiple episodes like in an hour or whatever. Recommend that. I recommend for anyone who's ever thought of reading the Bible. It's a good way to go about doing it. But Mount Moriah is where Abraham consecrated the relationship with God, and the Jewish people became God's chosen people because God asked him to sacrifice his son Isaac. He takes Isaac up to Mount Moriah and is about to cut his throat to sacrifice him, and then God stops him and says, "No, do not sacrifice your son." Basically, it was a test, and he passed the test. And so God said, "Okay, we now have a covenant." That was the covenant between the Jewish people and God. But the covenant required that when the Messiah came, the people would recognize the Messiah. That was part of the agreement. Okay. And so God held up his end of the agreement, right, by looking out for the Jewish people. And then when he sent his only son, Jesus, to be the Messiah, it wasn't what the Jewish elite, the Pharisees, were looking for. Because they, according to their scriptures and what they were expecting a warlord. They were expecting someone who was going to unite all the tribes of Judea and lead basically a revolution against their enemies. At the time, it would have been the Romans. They were living under Roman rule. And that was the expectation, is that a warlord was going to come forth and lead them and then establish this secular kingdom for the Jews. All right. And that's what they expected. And Jesus said, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to lead you against the Romans. This world doesn't matter. This world is temporary. This world does not matter. Okay. This world is full of evil. The only world that matters is the kingdom after this world, the eternal kingdom, my Father's kingdom. Don't worry about this kingdom here. Worry about the one that comes in the afterlife." And so when the Jewish authorities rejected him, because many Jewish people became Jesus' followers, they became the early Christians. Also, a lot of Gentiles as well, like Greeks who were living in the Decapolis, Romans as well, like Roman citizens. All of them technically were Roman citizens. But when the Jewish authorities rejected Christ, when they rejected him, they broke the covenant. They broke Abraham's covenant, and they stopped being God's chosen people at that point. And that was when the Christians became God's chosen people. The followers of Christ became God's chosen people. And Jesus was very clear about that, that anyone who believes in me is are God's children, the chosen. So Mike Huckabee is wrong when he says that. Like he is just fundamentally like regurgitating a falsehood when he says that the chosen people, according to like Christian value, like he's invoking Christian values when he says this, that are Jewish people. It's not accurate. Now, if you're Jewish and you want to believe that the Jews are still chosen people, that's fine. Like, okay, we're all entitled to a different opinion. But for Mike Huckabee to sit there and say that Christians believe that Jews are the God's chosen people, you're defying scripture when you say that. And as someone who's not like, I don't go out there and preach, the word. I'm not someone who leads with that in my analysis or my public commentary. I take great offense to that Mike Huckabee, who is somebody who I think he's a pastor, if I'm not mistaken, for him to say that is just offensive and wrong. And and then when he says that, they provide the moral foundation for Western civilization, that's wrong. The Jewish people do not provide the moral foundation for civilization. Jesus provides the moral foundation for civilization, and he was rejected by the Pharisees. Okay. And it was his lessons of forgiveness and grace and mercy. Those were the things that the Pharisees did not like. They were like, that doesn't resonate with us. We want revenge against our captors. We want revenge against the Romans. We want revenge against all the people who have wronged us. We want revenge. And you can hear that resonating in the words of Bibi Netanyahu and the words of all the Israeli leaders who say they want revenge on all the people in the Middle East who've wronged them. You can see it, these lessons playing out in real time right in front of you. And so again, I just reject everything that Mike Huckabee says. I think it's interesting. It's very interesting that Donald Trump selected Mike Huckabee to be the ambassador to Israel at this moment in time. It was a signal to me because Mike Huckabee, for those who don't remember, Mike Huckabee was one of the first people appointed. I think there was like some low level person was also appointed before Mike Huckabee, but then it was Mike Huckabee. He was like the first big name that was appointed to the administration. And I remember because like the Nick Fuentes Groyper crowd was all up in arms that the ambassador to Israel was appointed and like named before the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State or like any of those people, which I thought was funny. I was like, this is like a caricature, right? This is like, if you wanted to create a caricature of an Israeli puppet, this is what you would do. And this is what Trump has done. And you would appoint a guy who literally has said for 20 some years that there is no such thing as Palestine and that it's a made up place. And all you have to do is just erase the name on the map and just write in Israel and we can just move on with our life. Interesting. Anyway, I apologize for going on about that, but it's just something that I think needed to be said. And anyway, so on that same note, we can go here. Yeah, and I had to get the part out about, Jesus, because I just think that that's, with everything that's happened in the past week and Charlie Kirk and all that, like, I just think that that's the part of as I said before, that's the facet of Charlie that needs to like live on. That's the part that deserves to be immortalized. And so I think all of us have a responsibility, who are Christians, have a responsibility that when those opportunities present themselves, we need to seize the opportunity to just educate everybody on what the truth is there. And that is the truth. So is what it is. Trump says he'll host Erdogan at the White House next week. And it's interesting because Erdogan and Netanyahu do not like one another at all. And Syria is a big reason why they're in a big, they've been in the big public spat, not only Gaza. I mean, Gaza has been a big point of contention for both of them, but Syria as well. U.S. President Donald Trump announces that he will host Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan at the White House on Thursday. We are working on many trade and military deals with Erdogan, including the large-scale purchase of Boeing aircraft, a major F-16 deal, and a continuation of the F-35 talks. which we expect to conclude positively, Trump writes on True Social. President Erdogan and I have always had a very good relationship. I look forward to seeing him on the 25th. Israel has, in the past, expressed concern over the potential sale of the advanced F-35 fighter jets to Turkey and other nearby countries to preserve its military qualitative edge in the region. I've talked about that before. The qualitative edge, I think it's the QME. I think it's actually the qualitative military edge. I think this person miswrote that, but it's the QME, which is like codified into law by Congress. Today, Israel is the only country in the Middle East with F-35s in its arsenal, currently operating 45 of the aircraft with another 30 units on order. So what's interesting here is that, oh wow, look, Vance has the Crown Prince. We gotta look at that too. You may recall that back in May when Trump went to Saudi Arabia and he did the big speech in Riyadh, they announced a $142 billion military deal, like military arms deal between the U.S. I think it's the biggest arms deal in U.S. history. Certainly the biggest arms deal in like the Middle East, where basically we were going to outfit Saudi's whole military. We were going to give Saudi Arabia a legitimate first world military. And F-35s are at the top of the list. That was the thing that MBS has said for many, many years. He wants F-35s because he wants the best. He wants the latest and greatest. Now, arguments can be made about whether or not the F-35 is actually the greatest, or whether it is, you know, a hole in the ocean in which you pour money in, as some people say to describe boats. I think maybe we'll probably see some fighters come out in the next few years that are going to be much better than the F-35, but we'll see. I would defer to General Quast on the F-35 there, but the F-22 is fantastic. I think as I understand it, the F-22 is very, very good. Before that, the F-18 is obviously, I think, the standard, and then the F-15 Strike Eagle, which is what General Quast flew, even as a general, which was amazing to learn that. The F-15, I think, has kind of been the gold standard for a very long time. So anyway, but that's a very, very, very large plane, much bigger than the F-18. I think this is interesting because Turkey is a NATO ally. And so because it's NATO, you could make the argument that, and because of Asian, like Turkey kind of straddles Europe and the Middle East, right? You can make the argument that even though it's technically in the Middle East, it's part of NATO, and, you know, we're trying to fight the big scary Russians, so we need to outfit NATO allies with the equipment they need to fight the Russians. Giving the F-35 to Erdogan sets the precedent for giving the F-35 to MBS, which is what he wants. And again, I don't even know if it's about the F-35. I think what it's about is the fact that Israel has the F-35, and because of the qualitative military edge, meaning that anytime you give any Middle Eastern country any equipment, you have to either give Israel better equipment or you have to send a garrison of troops down there to reinforce what they already have. That's what is written into law. We've gone through the code on the show before. And so because Israel has the F-35, by giving the F-35 to Saudi Arabia, you then have to give Israel something better. Well, technically there is nothing better right now, which is why it doesn't sound like Saudi Arabia is going to get that F-35 right now. We're going to talk about that in a second. This is an interesting little tidbit. This was published today at 9 p.m. Israeli local time. It says Vance hosts Jordanian Crown Prince for dinner. U.S. President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance hosted Jordanian Crown Prince Hussein and Princess Rajwa at the Naval Observatory in Washington yesterday for dinner, according to confirmations from both their offices. That's fascinating because for those who don't know who Prince Hussein is, young guy in his 30s. I'm pretty sure he's younger than MBS. Him and his dad, I put out videos of them doing like special forces training. Young, good-looking, athletic guy. Maybe one day will be a really great leader, strong leader. Could be like another MBS for Jordan. His father seems like a good man. His father catches a lot of flack for, being like a quote unquote Israel puppet. But it's really important to understand that his father's cousins and uncles were brutally murdered by the CIA in 1958 in Iraq, because his father tried to establish a Hashemite kingdom, but like basically turn Jordan and Iraq into one country, or at least one kingdom with two countries in between it, like two countries inside of it, with his brother, who was the king of Iraq. And as a result, that was in the 50s. And as a result, like Abdullah's father left Iraq. And right after he left Iraq, basically the Ba'ath Party or the proto-Ba'ath Party took over, did like a violent revolution against the palace. The king and the prime minister were cut up, like head, hands, feet, all cut off, bodies strung up naked, put on display. And then the women and the children were brought into the courtyard, and all of them were executed in a very brutal coup. And Iraq has never been the same since. That's when the democracy took over in Iraq, and then later that democracy became known as the ruling party became known as the Ba'ath Party, and that's how Saddam Hussein came into power in the I think it was the 60s or the 70s. All this history is really important to understand because it sets up what happens with 9/11. All of it sets up 9/11, and then it sets up everything that's happened since. So I've been trying to like understand it better. And then that brings us to this very important story. And I'm going to go to the Badlands news brief to grab it because I know I put it in yesterday's brief. Here it is. Yeah, so from Arab News, the Saudi Crown Prince and Pakistani Prime Minister sign a joint strategic defense agreement. Okay, so MBS invites the Pakistani Prime Minister. Pakistan has been putting out pure signal lately. Back in April, we played the video on this show. It was one of the first episodes of this show of their defense minister explaining to an RT journalist how America had the West had created jihad, like Islamic jihad, like radical jihad was a creation of the Western intelligence agencies in the 70s. And Brad Zerbo talked about that in his film. Codex 9/11, because in order to fund the Mujahideen in the 70s and 80s, these are like the quote unquote freedom fighters in Afghanistan who were fighting the Soviets. We sent all the money that was funding those guys. Osama bin Laden was the leader of that group, by the way, recruited by Zbigniew Brzezinski, the national security advisor under Jimmy Carter. We sent all the money to Pakistan, and then Pakistan was the one who was distributing the money to Osama bin Laden, his mentor, whose name escapes me, and the Mujahideen. So yeah, Pakistan became like the incubation chamber for radicalizing all these people. So anyway, this is kind of like that story coming full fruition. As I said, all this stuff connects to 9/11. So the agreement stipulates that any aggression against either country is an aggression against both. It aims to develop aspects of defense cooperation between the two countries and enhance joint deterrence against any aggression. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif signed a joint strategic defense agreement in Riyadh on Wednesday, Saudi press agency reported. The agreement comes within the framework of the two countries' efforts to enhance their security and achieve security and peace in the region and the world. It aims to develop aspects of defense cooperation between the two countries and enhance joint deterrence against any aggression. This agreement stipulates that any aggression against either country is an aggression against both, SPA said. The Prime Minister arrived in Riyadh earlier on Wednesday for a state visit, accompanied by a high-level delegation. An official reception was held in honor of the Prime Minister, and the two leaders held a session of talks. Sharif asked that his greetings and best wishes be conveyed to King Salman. The two sides reviewed the historic and strategic relations between their countries and a number of topics of common interest. Sharif expressed his thanks and appreciation to the Crown Prince for the warm welcome and generous hospitality that he received. He extended his best regards to the Saudi leadership and people, wishing them further progress, prosperity, and prosperity. I think there's a typo there. So what's interesting here is a number of things. Number one, so I think this has to do with the fact that $142 billion defense agreement, the military arms deal between Trump and MBS, which is now on hold because it's now under congressional review for the qualitative military edge. And they're basically saying that we can't give $142 billion worth of military arms to Saudi Arabia because then that means we have to turn around and give whatever, $200 billion worth of stuff to Israel, or we have to send them a whole battalion of soldiers. That's what's written into law, passed, I think, in 2008 by Congress. So that's all on hold. And basically what the analysts were saying is that by the time that thing gets picked apart, it's going to be like a $12 billion defense deal, which is nothing. They want like a military. So this gives them, in the meantime, this gives them a deterrence against Israeli aggression. Israel just bombed Qatar. Qatar has been a good ally to Israel in recent years, even before the Abraham Accords were signed. So there's a good chance that Saudi Arabia could be bombed next. I think there's a really good chance that could happen under like different pretenses than Hamas being in Saudi Arabia because they're not there. But as this says, any attack on Pakistan is attack on Saudi Arabia. Any attack on Saudi Arabia is an attack on Pakistan. And what makes that a big deal is the fact that Pakistan has nuclear weapons. All right. The Soviet Union gave Pakistan nuclear weapons back in like the 70s. So Pakistan has been a nuclear power for a very long time. India is a nuclear power as well. And that was why the whole Pakistan-India conflict that erupted earlier in the summer was a big deal, was because that was the one conflict around the world that was actually between two nuclear powers. Ukraine does not have nuclear bombs officially. I mean, NATO does, but, technically Ukraine does not. So even though NATO is like, it's a proxy war, it's not like Russia is bombing NATO soil. They're bombing NATO adjacent soil. Pakistan and India being in a fight with one another is a little scary because they both have nuclear weapons, and all it takes is for somebody to get a hot trigger finger on one side and fire a nuclear weapon at the other, and all of a sudden we're in nuclear war, right? So again, Saudi Arabia has positioned itself as a geopolitical leader. Like the whole world respects Saudi Arabia for a number of reasons. But all of Europe has Saudi Arabia's back. The US obviously has Saudi Arabia's back. Russia has Saudi Arabia's back. Even Iran has Saudi Arabia's back. China certainly does. Everyone has Saudi Arabia's back. No one is messing with Saudi Arabia. Okay. Probably including Israel, right? I mean, so from one perspective, now Pakistan, which has nuclear weapons, also has Saudi Arabia's back. If you attack Saudi Arabia, that's like attacking Pakistan. Well, Pakistan has nukes. So, FAFO. But also, deep state, if you attack Pakistan, Saudi Arabia is now going to go to war with you. Well, guess what? Even though Saudi Arabia has a really small military right now, everyone has Saudi Arabia's back. So even though they're a small kid on the playground, so to speak, all the big kids have that small kid's back. And if you mess with that kid, we're all friends with his older brother and we're going to kick your ass. So no one's going to mess with Pakistan now, because messing with Pakistan means you mess with Saudi Arabia, and that's just how it works. So that is a really, really interesting development. I've seen some analysts in the Middle East speculating whether this is going to become like a NATO, like maybe MBS is trying to put together a NATO agreement, like a NATO type agreement around the entire Middle East. Like if you attack any of us, you attack all of us, like an Article 5 thing for Israel, which is ultimately, I speculated back in December or November 2022. It wasn't even on Badlands. It was on my other friend's podcast that the Abraham Accords it was not about protecting Israel from the Arabs. It was about protecting the Arabs from Israel. And that's exactly what I think this is. I think the Abraham Accords are going to become like a NATO Article 5 situation, where if Israel attacks Iraq or Syria or Iran, it's going to go to war with the entire Middle East. It's going to go to war with Israel, which means that, other allies around the world are going to step in on behalf of the Muslims. That could be what's going to happen here. I think again, in the short term, this makes sense because you're trying to deter the Zionists from expanding their war. But long term, we want to get away, I think, from these military agreements, these defensive alliances, because this is how World War I started, because everybody signed these kinds of agreements, you know, at the turn of the 20th century. And then Arch Ferdinand was killed in in Serbia, like at a parade in Serbia. And then all of a sudden, you know, up here in Europe, Ferdinand, who I believe was the Austro-Hungarian, which, you know, if you can look at Austria and Hungary, the Austro-Hungarian leader was killed in Serbia in Belgrade, I think it was, at a parade. And then because of that, because of all these ridiculous alliances, it was like a domino effect. Every single country, which didn't even really want to go to war, was forced to go to war because everyone was declaring war against one another. And before you knew it, the entire world was at war. Before there was even really a shot fired, aside from the shot fired at Archduke Ferdinand. So we want to we want to avoid that situation where the entire world is forced to go to war because one guy gets killed. But I can understand why MBS is doing this in the short term. It's because it's about halting Israeli aggression and flexing up on the deep state and saying, if you mess with Saudi Arabia, you're messing with a nuclear power in Pakistan. If you mess with Pakistan, you're messing with the kid on the playground in Saudi Arabia, who all the big kids are going to have his back, and they're going to kick your ass if you come after him. So, yeah, FAFO. T-Bone 316. This is all to drive up weapon sales to those countries. Ghost, don't fall for the drama. Well, yes and no. That's not exactly actually true. And see, there's a cynicism in the geopolitical world. Scott Ritter is very guilty of it. I think Scott Ritter has great analysis when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. But his take on the Qataris and the Saudis is that they don't give a shit about the Palestinians, and that they basically are willing to allow Palestine to be annexed by Israel and for all of it to become Israel if it means they get to start the golden age and go into the next epoch of human civilization. I don't think that's true at all. I think that they are willing to basically stake their flag in Palestine and say, which is what the Qataris did last week. They put down their flag and they said, the Emiratis did it. The Emiratis, it was the morning of the attack on Qatar by Israel, the Emiratis said, we will formally dissolve the Abraham Accords if you annex the West Bank. That's what the Emiratis said to Israel. They said, if you move forward with this new plan to annex 85% of the West Bank and turn it into Israel, we consider the Abraham Accords over, and we're going to go back to wanting to destroy you, along with the rest of the Muslims. That was a big flex by the UAE, and the Qataris echoed that after Israel attacked them. The Qataris summoned everyone to Qatar, not just the 17 countries in the Arab League, but also the 57 countries that make up the Islamic Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which includes Russia, which I believe includes China. Lavrov was meeting with the Qatari foreign minister or prime minister before that meeting. So don't just fall into cynicism where you think that this is just to drive up weapon sales and to make the defense contractors rich. I can show you a rabbit hole where the defense contractors are now all being investigated for using child slavery in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Those investigations are happening right now. And if you think those investigations are all full of shit, just keep in mind that dozens and dozens and dozens of the most powerful oil and diamond executives in the world have been put in prison by these same authorities over the past 5 years. So it's easy to fall into cynicism and say, yeah, this is nothing. This is just, drama. In years past, I would have agreed with you, but we all saw what happened in November of 2017 when members of the Saudi royal family, some of the richest men in the world, were rounded up and thrown in prison. Some of them were killed. Some of them had their cars blown up. Some of them had their jets shot out of the sky. That happened. So you could argue that that was drama too, but that was drama with very real world consequences. So don't sleep on what the Sovereign Alliance, I think, is doing. And look what's happening in Venezuela right now. So I apologize for the sidebar there. And T-Bone, I'm not picking on you. I was really picking more on Scott Ritter because I think Scott Ritter has a really cynical view of the Arabs and views them as like, incapable almost of like compassion. That's what I sense when I listen to his analysis of the Middle East. And it's it's like you're robbing people of their humanity when you act like they aren't capable of sympathy, empathy, or compassion. And I would argue that the Arabs have demonstrated far more compassion for Israel than Israel has demonstrated for any of the Arabs. So let's go, because we're at 4:00 now. So we're not going to get to the Russians, but I'll just share this one story because this is interesting, and we didn't get to Britain either. So on Tuesday we will cover the Keir Starmer Trump meeting because there's a lot to unpack from that, and then we'll get into more of this NATO Russia stuff. We'll stay away from the Middle East on Tuesday, unless of course something crazy happens. But I think we've spent enough time talking about Charlie Kirk in the Middle East, and it's time to move on for now. Trump offers explanation for Poland's drone incident. The UAVs could have been disabled and were falling all over the place, but U.S. president has said the drones that violated Poland's airspace could have been disabled and lost control. U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested. This is interesting. Warsaw has claimed that 19 drones entered the country's airspace on September 10th, accusing Moscow of staging a provocation in order to test NATO's response. Multiple EU officials, including top diplomat Kaja Kallas, have called the incident a deliberate violation. Trump was asked about the affair in an interview with Fox News on Thursday. The U.S. president refused to say whether the drone incursion was deliberate or not, suggesting the drones could have simply strayed after being subjected to electronic interference. Quote, I can't comment on whether it was a mistake or not. They shouldn't have been there. Let's face it. Supposedly they were disabled. They disabled drones today. The great attack on a drone is disabling it, and they fall all over the place, Trump stated, adding that he was very disappointed by the incident. The latest of Trump's remarks on the incident differed from the statements he made earlier this week when the U.S. president suggested it could have been a mistake. So kind of leaving it there, he's kind of telling you, like, assuming this story is real, like assuming that drones actually fell out of the sky onto Polish territory, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, maybe the whole thing's just made up. Maybe they were hacked by the CIA, by NATO, by MI6, by whoever the black hat forces are. And then they were flown, like against the will of the Russians, flown into Polish territory and then shot down. And it's like, oh, well, Russia was trying to fly a mission into NATO territory. Because remember, look, Poland does not share a border with Russia. And while I'm sure Russia does fly drone flights through Belarus because they're a close ally, and certainly through Ukraine because they're at war with them, it's not like they're trying to invade Poland. That's what CNN wants you to think, but that's not what's actually happening. Fox News too, they want you to think that. So anyway, let's go to the rants and get everyone out of here because it's 4:00 and it's Friday, and I want everyone to enjoy their weekend. Appreciate y'all being here. Hit the thumbs up. Mooney's mom, Frenchie, $5. Thank you, Ghost. Well, thank you, Mooney's mom, Frenchie. That's a great name. I appreciate that handle. And then I always want to check the boosts because I want to make sure that we are getting everyone's comments. If you're listening to this on replay, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv. You can click on the boost page. I think you can also just go to badlandsmedia.tv/boost. And then you can enter you can do like it's like a Rumble rant, but it stays there forever. Okay, so it looks like we got two from Halo Daisy. So it says, the first one was $10. It says, I need to apologize for my last boost. My thoughts came out on paper all wrong. I have problems putting feelings to paper. It sounded like I was bashing you, not even close. I was agreeing with you. That's all I'll say, as not to dig the hole deeper. Well, Halo, you don't, let me just go to check to see what you said. So it says, it looks like on September 5th, you said, was just going to thank you all for your hard work. Then you said how bad the Republican Party is. It's not a two-party system. It's a one-party system. They don't work for us. So disgusted with all of them. Hope to meet you in Cocoa Beach. God bless. Halo, just to be clear, I appreciate the clarification, but I did not take that as a like attack. I took that as just a very fair, clarifying statement. But I agree with you. It's not a two-party system. It's a one-party system. Yeah, and I agree that we have to break out of that thinking. Appreciate the clarification. And then it looks like there's another $5 boost from Halo Daisy. A great show. I've learned so much from you. I respect your honesty and your integrity. Your perspective on all this is really important. Is very important. The chat here is awesome as well. God bless you and your family. Hope Greg and I can make to Cocoa Beach to meet you, Deb. Deb, y'all are Greg is this is the school, the school principal. Yeah. And Greg, we never got a chance to connect because y'all got busy, but we will connect and we will speak. And I hope to see y'all in Cocoa Beach. But if we don't see you there, we need to speak before that because I want to help y'all with whatever Matt and I can with y'all's curriculum. But thank you for reaching out. And I never took offense to what you said before. Even if I had taken offense, I have very thick skin and it's really hard to hurt my feelings. So I hope that's clear. But thank you all again. Looks like we have another rant that came in. JK Nerdy, thanks, Ghost. I appreciate your efforts. JK Nerdy, I always appreciate you being here. And Deb is right. The chat here is very smart. There's a lot of really, really smart people in our chat. I appreciate all y'all and your thoughts. I like feedback. So if you don't agree with everything I say, let me know. Feel free to send me stories. Feel free to send me ideas for things you want me to talk about. I will always be open to that. I don't get upset or triggered when people disagree with me or challenge anything that I present. I like hearing that stuff. So thanks again for being here. And on that note, we'll let a little bit of Leonard Skinner take us out of here. Geopolitics. See you Tuesday.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.